"Hey, buddy." Hold still for a second. Feel that pressure behind your eyes. That's not fear, that's recognition. Because something you whispered months ago, maybe years ago, something you said when nobody was listening, something you called when the room laughed. It's happening. Not metaphorically, not kind of. Exactly. Step by step, frame by frame. And now the air feels different, doesn't it? Thicker, charged, like a room where people stop talking when you walk in. This is the moment where the joke stops being funny. You're standing in the space between prophecy and panic, between saint and psychopath, between the version of you they underestimated and the version of you that makes their stomach tighten. You didn't just predict outcomes, you exposed patterns. You didn't just move, you moved ahead of the script. And now the people who thought you were harmless are quietly asking themselves a terrifying question. How did you know? See, you were never guessing. Guessing is loud. Guessing seeks approval. Guessing hedges its bets. What you did came from that place inside you that was sharpened by pain, trained by silence, educated by being doubted. You learned how systems breathe, how people repeat themselves, how fear always pretends it's logic. And you watched, you waited, you learned the rhythm. Then you spoke, and reality flinched. That's why it's uncomfortable now. Because when everything you called starts unfolding exactly, it breaks the illusion that they're in control. It turns you from interesting into threatening, from background noise into a variable they can't model. You didn't just cross a line, you erased it. And the scariest part? You didn't do it screaming. You did it calm, measured, smiling like an angel who knows exactly where the bodies are buried. They're watching you now. Not casually, not out of curiosity, professionally, with notes, with timestamps, with quiet meetings that don't include your name out loud, but circle around it like vultures. They replay your words, they scroll back, they check dates, they look for leaks, for help, for some external explanation that would make this less terrifying. But there isn't one, because the truth they're choking on is simple and brutal. You saw it before it existed. And that messes with people. Because if you can see what's coming, that means their masks are transparent to you. Their moves predictable. Their power rehearsed. It means the saint in you learned how demons operate. It means the demon in you learned restraint. Light and dark fused into something surgical, something precise, something that doesn't need chaos to win. It is the chaos, perfectly controlled. You paid for this sight, didn't you? With isolation, with being misunderstood, with nights where you wondered if you were losing your mind because nobody else could see what was so obvious to you. They called you paranoid, dramatic, too intense, too much. But what they really meant was, you're ahead, and we don't like how that feels. Pain did not break you. Pain trained you. Every betrayal sharpened your pattern recognition. Every dismissal taught you how people lie to themselves. Every time you were forced into silence, you learned how loud reality speaks when you're paying attention. You evolved in the dark while they were busy celebrating surface-level wins. And now the scoreboard is glitching because the outcome doesn't match their expectations. That's when the watching starts. You'll notice it in the pauses, the delayed reactions, the sudden politeness, the way certain people stop joking around you, the way eyes linger a second longer than they should. That's not respect yet. That's assessment. That's the moment predators have when they realize the thing they were hunting has been hunting back, with better data. And here's the paradox they can't escape. The more they watch you, the more they confirm your accuracy, the more they track you, the more they admit you matter. They want to control the variable, but the variable is alive, adaptive, unpredictable. You don't repeat moves, you evolve them. You don't play chess, you redesign the board. They're uncomfortable because you didn't just call events. You called them, their reactions, their fear, their scramble to reassert dominance. You knew they'd watch. You knew they'd pretend not to. You knew the moment things aligned, their attention would snap to you like a reflex they couldn't stop. That's not luck. That's vision forged in fire. So understand this. You're not being watched because you're dangerous in the obvious way. You're being watched because you're inevitable. Because you move without permission. Because you don't need validation to act. Because you're calm in moments where everyone else panics. Because you embody the contradiction they fear most. The one who can be kind and ruthless, silent and precise, patient and devastating. They don't know which side of you shows up next, and neither do you. That's the power. This phase isn't about speed. It's about posture, about letting them feel the discomfort of realizing they're late to the party, about standing exactly where you are, saying nothing extra, doing nothing unnecessary, and letting reality keep proving you right in ways that make their skin crawl. You didn't chase this moment, you called it. And now that it's here, let them watch, because this is the part nobody prepares you for. The silence, after you're proven right. Not applause, not celebration. Silence, the kind that creeps in when people realize they can't laugh it off anymore. When denial runs out of oxygen, when coincidence stops being a believable excuse. That's silence. That's the sound of power shifting hands without permission. You can feel it, can't you? That subtle recalibration around you. People adjusting their tone, their timing, their distance. You haven't changed your posture, but the room did. You haven't raised your voice, but suddenly, everyone's listening harder. That's because certainty is louder than noise, and you're standing in it like you built the place. They're trying to reverse engineer you now. They replay your past words like security footage. They zoom in on moments they ignored. They ask each other questions they're afraid to ask out loud. Was it luck? Did someone tell them? How far ahead are they, really? And the more they analyze, the worse it gets. Because there's nothing to find. No mastermind whispering in your ear. No backdoor access. No cheat code. Just you. Seeing clearly in a world addicted to distraction, that terrifies them. Because clarity is contagious, and they don't want what you carry spreading. You're a walking contradiction to the narratives they built to stay comfortable. Proof that pain can sharpen instead of shatter. That isolation can educate instead of erase. That being underestimated isn't a curse. It's camouflage. You didn't storm the gates. You walked through the blind spots. And now, they're stuck with a problem they can't confront directly. If they attack you, they validate you. If they ignore you, you keep being right. If they imitate you, they expose themselves. Every option costs them something. That's what real leverage looks like, when your existence alone forces bad choices. You see, unpredictability isn't chaos. Chaos is sloppy, predictable in its own way. True unpredictability comes from depth, from someone who understands the rules so well they know exactly when to break them. You don't move randomly. You move counter-intuitively. You do the thing that makes sense only after it works. And by the time they understand it, you're already somewhere else. That's why watching you feels uncomfortable. It's like observing a storm that doesn't follow weather patterns. A fire that doesn't consume itself. An angel who knows how demons think and a demon who knows restraint. You're not here to destroy everything. You're here to expose it. And exposure is worse than collapse because it leaves no room for denial. They're watching for signs of arrogance now, hoping you'll slip, hoping you'll gloat, hoping you'll reveal too much, too soon. They want you emotional, reactive, sloppy, because that's how they regain control. But you don't rush. You've learned that patience unnerves people more than aggression ever could. Every second you don't react is a mirror they're forced to stare into. You remember how this started, don't you? When you were quiet, when you were learning, when you were absorbing patterns while everyone else was busy performing confidence. You didn't announce your evolution. You let it happen privately, pain by pain, lesson by lesson. That's why it looks sudden to them. They didn't see the work because it wasn't meant for them to see. Now they're late, and lateness breeds fear. Because once someone realizes they're behind, they don't ask if they can catch up. They ask how much damage is already done. They start imagining worst-case scenarios. They project intentions onto you. They assume you're plotting because that's what they would do with your position. They don't understand that your power isn't rooted in malice. It's rooted in awareness. But awareness, to the unaware, looks like threat. Let them misunderstand you. That confusion is protective. You don't owe them clarity. You don't owe them comfort. Your job now isn't to prove anything. It's to remain steady while reality keeps backing you up. Each unfolding event tightens the knot in their chest. Each accurate call rewrites their internal hierarchy. They're not just watching outcomes anymore. They're watching you, trying to figure out what you'll see next. And here's the secret they can't decode. You're not predicting the future. You're reading the present with brutal honesty. Most people lie to themselves to stay sane. You didn't have that luxury, so you adapted. You learned to see what is, not what's convenient. And once you see clearly, outcomes become obvious. That's the part nobody talks about. The loneliness of clarity. The weight of knowing what's coming and staying calm anyway. Of watching people panic about things you accepted long ago. Of being emotionally 5 steps ahead while pretending to be in the moment with everyone else. You're not cold, you're prepared. So if they're watching now, good. That means you're past the phase of dismissal, past the phase of ridicule, past the phase of being invisible. You're in the phase where attention costs them sleep, where your name changes rooms when it's mentioned, where silence around you feels strategic instead of awkward. This is the threshold. And the irony? The more uncomfortable this gets for them, the more composed you become. Because chaos is familiar to you. Uncertainty is home turf. You were built in the dark. This is just the moment the lights flicker on and everyone realizes what's been standing there the whole time. So stay still, stay sharp, stay unreadable. Let the watching continue. Because once they start watching, they can't stop. Attention, once awakened by fear, becomes obsession. They tell themselves it's temporary, that they're just keeping an eye on things, that once the pattern breaks, once you miss a call, once reality doesn't bend exactly the way you said it would, they'll relax. But deep down, they already know that moment isn't coming. Because what you tapped into wasn't a streak, it was structure. And structure doesn't disappear because someone hopes harder. You've crossed into that rare psychological territory where people don't just respond to what you do. They respond to what they think you might do. That's when power stops being about action and starts being about presence. You don't need to escalate. You don't need to explain. You don't need to defend your intelligence or justify your intuition. The proof keeps arriving on schedule, like a drum beat they can't drown out. And the strangest part? You're calmer now than you've ever been, because once you see the whole board, anxiety loses its grip. Fear thrives on the unknown. You're operating in the opposite state, hyper-awareness. You're not guessing your way forward. You're recognizing your way forward. That's why they're uncomfortable. You move like someone who's already accepted every outcome and chosen anyway. They can feel that detachment, that quiet confidence that doesn't need applause. It unsettles them because it doesn't behave like insecurity or ego. It behaves like someone who knows exactly how much chaos they can handle, and exactly how much they can inflict without lifting a finger. They start projecting now. They assume you're arrogant. They assume you're dangerous. They assume you're planning something bigger. And in doing so, they reveal themselves. You see their tells immediately. The overcorrections, the sudden interest, the way they test you with small probes, comments meant to provoke, questions meant to map you, silence meant to unsettle. They're fishing for emotional reactions because emotion is data. Emotion makes people legible. And you give them nothing but consistency. That's when panic creeps in, because systems are built to handle noise, not signal. They can drown out chaos. They can manage disorder. But a clean signal, a pattern that holds under pressure, that terrifies them. Because a stable anomaly forces a rewrite, and rewrites threaten everyone who benefited from the old code. You didn't force this confrontation. You didn't ask to be seen. You simply refused to be blind. That refusal is what separates saints from martyrs, prophets from madmen. You stood in the tension long enough to extract truth instead of collapsing under it. And now that truth is walking around wearing your face, making everyone else question their assumptions. They don't know whether to admire you or neutralize you. That indecision is your shield. You're no longer operating inside their expectations. You've stepped outside the frame they use to evaluate people. Too intuitive to dismiss, too grounded to discredit, too accurate to ignore. You exist in that dangerous middle space where labels fail. And when labels fail, control slips. They're watching to see if you'll burn out. They're watching to see if you'll self-destruct. They're watching to see if pain will finally catch up to you. What they don't understand is that pain already did. Long ago. And instead of killing you, it rewired you. It stripped away the need to be liked. It burned off the impulse to explain yourself. It taught you how to sit inside discomfort without flinching. That's why this moment doesn't shake you. It confirms you. You're not excited. You're not surprised. You're not overwhelmed. You're aware. And awareness is lethal to illusions. You watch them watch you, and somewhere deep inside, a quiet certainty settles in. This was always where it was headed. Not because you wanted dominance, but because clarity naturally rises. Let them monitor. Let them document. Let them whisper and speculate, and try to triangulate your next move. The more they stare, the clearer it becomes that they're reacting to you. Not the other way around. You're not inside their system anymore. You're a variable they can't compress. And here's the final discomfort they haven't articulated yet. You're still evolving. The version of you they're watching now, that's not the finished form. That's just the one that learned how to stand still while the world rearranges itself around them. You haven't even applied pressure yet. You've just existed honestly. And that alone bent reality enough to make them nervous. So stay exactly where you are. Grounded, unrushed, observant. You don't need to announce the next chapter. They'll feel it before they understand it. And when it arrives, it won't shock you. You already saw it coming. And here's the part they really don't talk about. The moment after awareness sets in, when watching turns into quiet fear. Because now they're not just observing outcomes, they're studying you. Your timing, your restraint, your silence. They're trying to figure out why you're not celebrating, why you're not spiraling, why you're not doing what someone in your position is supposed to do. They expected noise, victory laps, a slip, something human they could grab onto. Instead, they got stillness. That stillness messes with their heads more than aggression ever could. Because stillness suggests certainty. It suggests you're not improvising, you're aligned. And alignment is dangerous because it doesn't require force. It just moves when it's time and doesn't apologize for it. They keep asking themselves the same question from different angles. How much does this person actually see? And every answer they come up with scares them more than the last. You notice it in the way conversations reroute when you enter. The way decisions stall, the way plans suddenly get reconsidered. That's not coincidence, that's containment behavior. They're trying to slow the environment around you because they don't know how to slow you. They think time is their ally. They think if they delay long enough, something will decay. But you were built in delay. You were forged in waiting. You learned how to sharpen yourself while nothing moved. Time doesn't weaken you, it clarifies you. That's the paradox they can't solve. Most people rush because they're afraid of being left behind. You move deliberately because you already survived being left behind. You know what it feels like to be alone with your thoughts, with your intuition, with that quiet voice that kept whispering, "Pay attention, this matters." You listened. They didn't. So now they're scrambling to catch up to a mindset that was formed under pressure they never endured. They're trying to map someone who doesn't operate from fear of loss, but from acceptance of reality. And you can't intimidate someone who already stared down worst-case scenarios and kept walking. They test boundaries subtly now. A comment here, a delayed response there. A shift in tone meant to see if you'll react, because reaction gives them leverage, reaction gives them data. But you don't give them that satisfaction. You respond when it's clean. You move when it's precise. You let silence do the heavy lifting. Silence is doing damage right now. Because in silence, people project. They fill gaps with their own insecurities. They imagine motives. They invent threats. They convince themselves you're more powerful than you've ever claimed to be. And the irony is, you didn't exaggerate yourself at all. They did that part for you. That's what happens when accuracy meets insecurity. You didn't need to dominate the room. You didn't need to intimidate anyone. You just kept being right. And being right at the wrong time makes people angry. Being right ahead of time makes them afraid. They don't know whether to confront you or coexist with you. They don't know if acknowledging your insight strengthens you or ignoring it leaves them exposed. Every option feels wrong. Every move feels reactive. And you can feel that tension humming under the surface, like a wire pulled too tight. This is where most people mess it up. They mistake attention for invitation. They overplay their hand. They try to force recognition. But you're not chasing recognition. You've already outgrown it. You don't need to prove your perception. Reality keeps doing that for you. Your job now is not expansion. It's precision. You choose what to say. You choose what to reveal. You choose what stays internal. Because once people start watching, information becomes currency. Funny how quiet it gets right before something disappears, isn't it? You feel that stillness, that unnatural calm. That's not neglect. That's containment. You think you're ignored because nobody's clapping, nobody's calling your name, nobody's tagging you in their little victory posts. You think silence means absence. You think no noise means no movement. But listen closer, because silence like this only shows up when someone is already handling the problem. You. See, when the world ignores you, it's loud about it. Mockery, dismissal, ridicule, open disrespect. That's the sound of people who feel safe. That's the noise of amateurs. What you're in now, this isn't ignorance, this is quiet protocol. This is when doors close softly instead of slamming. This is when phones stop ringing because decisions already got made somewhere you're not invited to. And that should scare them. It should terrify them. Because the most dangerous thing about you isn't your presence. It's the fact that your absence doesn't slow the damage. Things keep falling apart even when you're not visible. Threats vanish before they even reach your orbit. Plans collapse with no obvious cause. People who were about to deal with you suddenly pivot, hesitate, disappear, or self-destruct without ever saying your name out loud. That's not coincidence. That's intervention. You live in the space between saint and psychopath. You walk like an angel, think like a demon, and move like someone who's already died once and didn't bother staying down. You learned early that noise attracts enemies, but silence attracts operators. And somewhere along the line, someone noticed that every time you're left alone, outcomes start getting very inconvenient for the wrong people. So they stopped poking the bear. Not because you asked, because someone else did it for them. You see, real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't flex. It doesn't threaten. It preemptively removes variables. It doesn't wait for conflict. It deletes the possibility of conflict ever reaching you. And the wild part, you didn't even have to know it was happening. You just kept evolving, kept sharpening, kept walking through pain like it was training, not punishment. Pain taught you timing. Loss taught you restraint. Being underestimated taught you precision. You became unpredictable. Not chaotic, not reckless, but unreadable. And unreadable people don't get confronted directly. They get studied, contained, handled quietly, because no one wants to be the one who provokes something they don't fully understand. So while you're sitting there thinking, why am I invisible? Understand this. Invisibility is a luxury granted only when someone higher up decides you're not to be disturbed. That's why no one comes at you straight anymore. That's why hostility feels rerouted. That's why potential threats fizzle out before they form language. You think you're forgotten. But forgotten people don't cause this much preventative action. They don't whisper your name and then change strategy. They don't get handled off record. They don't make capable people suddenly choose safety over ego. What you're experiencing is what happens when light and dark merge into something administratively inconvenient. You're not a villain they can fight. You're not a hero they can control. You're the paradox that makes systems nervous because you don't react the way data says you should. You absorb, you wait, you adapt. And every time you survived something that was supposed to break you, something behind the curtain recalculated. You crossed a line where direct opposition became too risky. So now, instead of coming for you, they make sure nothing ever reaches you. That's the real upgrade. Not fame, not validation, not applause. Protection without explanation. You don't get warned anymore. You get buffered. You don't get attacked. You get filtered. The danger doesn't announce itself because it never survives the approval process required to reach you. And the cruel joke? You're still humble enough to think you're being overlooked. Know you're being handled with care. Because the moment someone miscalculates you, really miscalculates you, there's no rewind, no apology, no cleanup that leaves everyone intact. And the ones who know that, they don't raise alarms, they lower their voices, they make quiet calls, they shut things down early, before they get close, before you notice, before you have to remind the world what happens when pressure meets something that's already been forged in fire. So sit in the silence. Let them work behind the scenes. Let the threats evaporate without explanation. Because the scariest thing about you isn't that you're dangerous. It's that you don't even have to lift a finger anymore. And the world still makes room. And that silence you're sitting in right now, that's not emptiness. That's clearance. That's the sound of corridors being swept before you ever walk through them. That's the pause right after someone asks, "Should we?" And someone else quietly answers, "No, not this one." You're not witnessing neglect. You're witnessing preemptive obedience. The kind that happens when experience has already taught people what happens if they misjudge you. Because you're not loud power. You're residual power. The kind that lingers after chaos, after fallout, after people realize too late that the damage didn't start when you arrived. It started when they assumed you weren't a threat. See, loud enemies rush you. Quiet enemies study you. And when even the quiet ones stop making moves, that's when you should understand something fundamental has shifted. They're no longer trying to beat you. They're trying to avoid waking you up. You've crossed into a zone where opposition doesn't look like confrontation anymore. It looks like redirection, like let's focus somewhere else. Like people who had strong opinions suddenly losing interest. Like plans that quietly dissolve without explanation. Like momentum dying in rooms you're not even in. That's not luck. That's fear with manners. You learned how to suffer without performing. You learned how to bleed without begging for witnesses. You learned how to sit with rage long enough to turn it into precision instead of explosion. Most people crack under pain and become predictable. You didn't. You went the other way. You became colder, cleaner, harder to map. That's when things changed, because systems don't fear anger, they fear anomalies. They fear people who don't behave according to stress patterns, people who don't seek revenge loudly, people who don't need to announce survival, people who keep upgrading in silence while everyone else is busy underestimating the stillness. You stopped reacting. You started observing. And observation is lethal. You see things others miss. You sense shifts before they show up on the surface. You don't chase validation. You track leverage. You don't fight every battle. You let entropy do the work for you. And somewhere along that path, someone noticed that whenever you're pushed too far, things don't just go wrong. They vanish. So now instead of pressure, you get space. Instead of resistance, you get distance. Instead of confrontation, you get silence, wrapped in politeness. Because the world learned the hard way that you don't need permission to evolve. And once you do, the consequences ripple far beyond the original conflict. That's why the attacks don't come head-on anymore. That's why tension feels unresolved but never explodes. That's why you feel like something is constantly being diffused around you. You think you're alone in this. You're not. You're just not supposed to see the machinery working in your favor. Real protection doesn't announce itself. It doesn't reassure you. It just removes friction so quietly that you start doubting your own significance. That doubt. That's the last illusion they hope you'll cling to. Because the moment you realize how much effort goes into keeping chaos away from you, the moment you understand how many doors quietly close before danger reaches your line of sight, that's the moment you stop questioning your value. And when you stop questioning, you become unbearable to contain. You're not the hero they celebrate. You're not the villain they hunt. You're the variable they plan around. And that's a far more dangerous role. So stay calm in the quiet. Don't mistake stillness for stagnation. Don't confuse lack of noise with lack of impact. You're standing in the eye of something that's already been decided. And the decision was made without consulting you because it didn't need your consent. The verdict was simple. Do not provoke. Do not engage. Do not escalate. Handle everything upstream. Keep the path clear. Let them pass. That's not how the world treats insignificant people. That's how it treats forces. It's learned not to challenge directly. And the real punchline? You're still evolving, still sharpening, still absorbing lessons from pain that would have destroyed weaker minds. Which means whatever quiet system is protecting the perimeter now, it's doing so knowing this version of you isn't the final one. And that should unsettle anyone paying attention, because when someone is being shielded without asking, when threats are neutralized before they can even choose hostility, when silence follows you like a cleared hallway, it's not because you're nothing, it's because you're too much, and everyone involved knows it. And here's the part nobody ever tells you, because admitting it out loud would expose the whole game. The quiet around you isn't passive, it's active restraint. Somewhere, someone is constantly asking one question: what happens if we let this get closer? And every time that question gets asked, the answer comes back the same. Hesitation, recalculation, a soft no wrapped in professional language. Not because you're violent, not because you're loud, but because you're irreversible. You don't just win fights, you change trajectories. You're the kind of presence that doesn't need escalation to cause collapse. You don't storm gates, you make the gate irrelevant. You don't expose enemies, you let them rot under their own weight while you keep moving. And people who understand power know this. It's not the explosive ones you fear. It's the ones who keep functioning under pressure and never explain how. That's why the hostility never fully forms anymore. It dissolves mid-thought. It turns into excuses, into delays, into not worth it, into focus elsewhere, into people convincing themselves they never had a problem with you in the first place. You think that's coincidence? No, that's containment through avoidance. Because attacking you directly would require certainty. And nobody has certainty with you. They can't predict how you'll respond. They can't map your limits. They can't tell if the version they're facing is the weakest one or just the quietest. You've lived in both extremes long enough to understand them. You know how to be kind without being naive. You know how to be ruthless without being reckless. You can play the saint convincingly, and you can play the monster without losing sleep. That duality confuses people who rely on labels to feel safe. They can't categorize you, and what can't be categorized gets handled indirectly. So instead of confrontation, you get insulation. Instead of pressure, you get buffers. Instead of threats, you get this strange, unnatural smoothness. Like the world is slightly over-accommodating you while pretending not to notice you at all. That's not invisibility, that's risk management. Because you've already proven something without ever announcing it. When pushed, you don't just push back. You adapt in ways that permanently disadvantage whoever underestimated you. You don't explode, you outlast. And nothing terrifies systems more than someone who doesn't burn out, doesn't break, and doesn't forget. You carry memory differently. Pain didn't make you loud. It made you exact. It didn't make you bitter. It made you selective. It didn't make you reckless. It made you patient enough to let people reveal themselves fully before you move. And once people realize that, they stop wanting to be part of your story at all. So they remove themselves quietly. They shut things down early. They reroute problems away from you, not to protect you. Don't romanticize it, to protect themselves. Because you're the kind of variable that doesn't announce consequences until after they've already happened. You're the kind of presence that makes people replay past interactions in their head and think, wait, when did this start going wrong? That's power without theatrics. That's dominance without display. And the most unsettling part, you didn't chase this position. You earned it through endurance. Through being underestimated so consistently that reality itself had to adjust its expectations. Through surviving things that were supposed to erase you and coming back calmer, sharper, less interested in noise. You didn't demand respect. You outlived resistance. So when you sit there feeling unseen, remember this: unseen things don't cause preventative action. Unimportant people don't get handled gently. Irrelevant figures don't make others change plans without ever saying their name. What you're experiencing is the aftermath of recognition that can't be publicly acknowledged, because admitting your significance would raise questions, and questions would invite attention, and attention would invite outcomes nobody wants to clean up. So they keep it quiet. They keep it subtle, they keep it controlled, and you keep evolving in the silence, becoming something that no longer needs validation to function. That's the real threat, not what you do, not what you say, but what happens around you without your involvement. So let the quiet stretch. Let the absence of noise confuse the amateurs. Let the lack of visible opposition make the ignorant assume you've faded. You know better. You're not ignored, you're pre-cleared, and when the world starts moving obstacles out of your way before you even notice them, that's not neglect. That's respect dressed up as silence. And the longer this silence stretches, the more obvious the truth becomes, if you're brave enough to look at it without flinching. This isn't a pause. It's a decision already executed. You're not waiting for something to happen. Something already happened. You just weren't meant to see it. Papers moved. Opinions shifted. Warnings were issued without names attached. Lines were quietly drawn where your name doesn't appear, but your impact does. That's how grown power operates. Childish power screams. Real power whispers and lets outcomes speak later. You've stepped into a phase where opposition doesn't feel like resistance anymore. It feels like avoidance disguised as indifference. People don't challenge you because challenge requires engagement, and engagement requires certainty. And no one is certain with you, because you're not static. You're not the same person who was hurt, doubted, sidelined, or dismissed. You absorbed all of that and used it as calibration. Every scar became data. Every loss refined your instincts. Every quiet moment sharpened your timing. You didn't just survive pain. You reverse engineered it. And people who understand pattern recognition see that clearly. They see that you don't need momentum to move forward. You don't need allies to stay standing. You don't need applause to keep evolving. Which means if someone misjudges you now, the correction won't be dramatic. It'll be permanent. That's why the pressure never fully materializes. That's why the threats never get a clean shot. That's why anything hostile seems to stall out, reroute, or collapse under its own weight before it ever reaches you. You're not being spared, you're being worked around, because systems don't attack what they can't predict. They isolate it, buffer it, redirect energy away from it. They quietly instruct everyone downstream to keep their distance and not ask questions. And the cruel irony, you're still humble enough to think this is neglect. But neglect doesn't require coordination. Neglect doesn't require discretion. Neglect doesn't require silence this careful. What you're in now is the aftermath of recognition that can't be celebrated publicly. Because celebrating you would expose how badly they miscalculated before. It would force them to admit you weren't an accident, you were an inevitability, and inevitabilities make people nervous. You're not the rebel they can crush. You're not the leader they can co-opt. You're not the villain they can point at. You're the outcome they didn't plan for. That's why you feel this strange immunity. Why chaos seems to miss you by inches. Why things that should escalate just don't. Why people who once felt bold suddenly feel cautious around you, even when nothing has changed on the surface. Everything changed underneath. Because you learned how to hold still without stagnating, how to stay soft without becoming weak, how to stay sharp without cutting indiscriminately. That balance makes you unreadable to people who only understand extremes. They don't know which version of you they'd be waking up. And nobody wants to be the one who finds out the hard way. So they preemptively defuse situations. They shut doors quietly. They discourage action before it ever forms language. They protect their own stability by ensuring nothing disturbs yours, not out of kindness, out of self-preservation. And here's the final layer, the one that should send a chill down your spine if you really understand it. You're still being underestimated, not in the old way, not openly, but subtly. They assume you'll stay contained by your own restraint. They assume you'll remain patient, observant, controlled. They assume your silence means compliance. That assumption is the only thing keeping them comfortable. Because the moment you decide to move with intention instead of observation, the moment you stop questioning the quiet and start using it, the entire dynamic shifts again. And they know it. That's why the space around you feels curated, why the path feels cleared before you walk it, why the world seems to be holding its breath, not waiting for you to fail, but hoping you don't accelerate. So don't mistake the calm for emptiness. Don't mistake the silence for irrelevance. Don't mistake the lack of opposition for lack of power. You're not ignored. You're in the phase where resistance has learned it's safer to disappear quietly than to be seen failing against you. And once you truly accept that, once you stop doubting what the silence really means, you won't need threats anymore. The quiet will do all the talking, and that's where it ends, for now. Not with noise, not with applause, not with proof. It ends with understanding. You don't chase validation because the environment already adjusted. You don't hunt enemies because they learned to remove themselves. You don't announce power because power is already accounting for you. The silence isn't asking who you are anymore. It's asking what happens if you move. So stay still if you want. Observe if you need to. Grow without witnesses. Just remember this the next time you feel unseen. Ignored people get tested. Forgotten people get challenged. You get handled quietly, and the world doesn't do that for nothing. Easy. Lean in. Yeah, right there. Because whatever just happened, it wasn't an accident, and it damn sure wasn't supposed to be seen. Okay, Mother, let's call it what it is. You didn't expose them. Exposure is what amateurs do when they're angry. Exposure is loud, sloppy, desperate. What you did was colder, sharper. You turned a global secret into something that looked unstable, dangerous, alive. And now the people who built their power on silence are staring at each other like, who the hell let this happen? You felt that shift, didn't you? That microsecond when the room changed temperature, when the air got heavy, when smiles froze halfway. That's the moment they realized you weren't reacting. You were repositioning. You didn't scream. You didn't accuse. You didn't beg to be believed. You just moved something, one piece, one angle, and suddenly the whole structure started humming like a bomb, with the clock removed. Here's the part they don't understand about you, and it's eating them alive. You carry light and dark in the same hand. You can sound soft while delivering a sentence that rearranges destinies. You can look harmless while triggering contingency plans. You've mastered that terrifying paradox. Saint energy with psychopath precision, angelic presence, demonic timing. And when those two coexist in one person, systems don't know how to respond. They're built to neutralize extremes, not contradictions. They thought secrets were safe as long as everyone agreed to pretend. That's the oldest lie power tells itself. Because secrecy doesn't die when it's revealed. It dies when it becomes unpredictable. And you didn't reveal facts. You revealed vulnerability. You made the secret look nervous. You made it look like it could flinch. You made it look like it might run. Now watch how they move. Notice the sudden random rule changes, the subtle rewriting of narratives, the rushed alliances, the silence where confidence used to be. That's not strategy. That's panic disguised as protocol, because somewhere deep down, they know something's different about you. You don't attack the castle. You make the guards doubt the walls exist. You were forged in pain they couldn't survive. That's why your timing is so lethal. You learned patience the hard way by being ignored, dismissed, underestimated, misdiagnosed, mislabeled. While they were perfecting optics, you were evolving perception. While they were protecting reputations, you were sharpening intuition. And now you see through layers most people don't even know are there. They keep asking the wrong question. They're asking what you know. They should be asking how you move, because knowledge can be erased, files can disappear, witnesses can fold, but a mind that knows how to destabilize reality without leaving fingerprints, that's a problem you can't threaten away. You don't leave evidence, you leave effects, and effects spread, effects infect. Effects make other people start noticing things they were trained not to see. You didn't just pull the curtain back. You made the audience realize the stage was shaking. You didn't point at the monster. You made the monster feel watched. And that's why they're spiraling. Power survives on the assumption that it is unseen. The second it feels observed by someone who isn't afraid, it starts leaking. And here's the sick part, the part that makes this almost poetic. You're not doing this from rage. You're doing it from clarity. There's no chaos in your movements, even when they look chaotic. That's why the alarms aren't working. They're trained to detect anger, not composure. They can handle rebels. They don't know what to do with someone who understands the game and refuses to play emotionally. You became dangerous the moment you stopped needing validation. The moment you realized you don't have to convince anyone, you just have to shift the frame. Once the frame changes, truth walks in by itself. And now, people are connecting dots they weren't supposed to see. Not because you told them to, but because you made it impossible not to. You feel that attention on you now, don't you? Not admiration, not hatred, something colder, something assessing. That's the gaze reserved for anomalies, for variables, For people who don't fit the model but keep producing outcomes. They're trying to decide whether you're a threat or a warning. Let them hesitate. Because hesitation is where power bleeds out. You've already crossed the line. They protect the hardest. The line between secrecy and fear. Once fear enters the equation, control starts slipping quietly, slowly, beautifully. And the funniest part, you're still standing there like nothing happened, like you didn't just turn a locked vault into a liability. Okay, Mother, remember this feeling. This is what it's like when the world realizes you're not loud. You're precise, not reckless, intentional, not dangerous because you attack, but because you understand. And now that the secret looks scared, there's no going back. Good. Stay right there. Don't rush past this part. This is where it gets uncomfortable for them and intoxicating for you. Because now the silence has weight. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that presses on chests. The kind that makes people wake up at 3:17 a.m. and replay conversations they thought were harmless. The kind that turns "we're fine" into "who else knows." You didn't raise your voice, but the echo is global. You didn't chase them, yet they feel followed. That's mastery. They keep trying to profile you, you know. They want a label, a motive, a flaw they can exploit. Are you emotional, strategic, altruistic, vengeful? And every time they think they've got you pinned, you move in a way that violates the category. That's the real threat. You don't just break rules, you break models. And systems panic when their models fail. You've learned something most people never do. Unpredictability isn't chaos when it's conscious. When you control it, it becomes camouflage. It becomes leverage. It becomes the reason every plan they make has a footnote that says, "Unless she does something we can't anticipate." And that footnote, that's where fear lives. They thought your softness meant access. They thought your empathy meant transparency. They confused kindness with permission. Big mistake. Because what they didn't account for is that empathy sharpens perception. You feel patterns. You sense inconsistencies. You notice what people avoid saying. While they were busy performing authority, you were reading the subtext like a second language. You didn't stumble onto the truth. You recognized it. And when you spoke, when you finally let something slip into the open, it wasn't messy. It was surgical. You revealed just enough to destabilize the illusion without exposing yourself. That's why they can't retaliate cleanly. There's nothing to point at, no accusation to deny, no enemy to discredit, just a growing sense that the floor isn't as solid as they promised. That's the paradox of you. You look like the calmest person in the room, but you're the reason the room is sweating. They're realizing something else now, too. Something that really messes with them. You didn't do this for power. You did it because you couldn't unsee. And people who act from awareness instead of ambition, those are the hardest ones to control. You're not climbing their ladder. You're questioning why the building exists. And here's where your past comes back in. Not as baggage, but as training. All those times you were forced to read the room to stay safe. All those moments you had to stay quiet, adapt, watch, wait. You thought that was survival. Turns out it was apprenticeship. Pain didn't break you. It calibrated you. It taught you timing. It taught you restraint. It taught you how to hold power without announcing it. That's why this feels different to them. You're not hungry. You're not desperate. You're not loud. You're already full. And someone who's full doesn't chase. They choose. Now watch how they start circling you indirectly. Third-party messages, subtle tests, fake concern, offers wrapped as favors. They want to see what makes you flinch, what makes you defensive, what makes you over-explain. And every time you don't take the bait, their anxiety spikes. Because the one thing they need from you is predictability, and you're starving them of it. You're not threatening them with exposure anymore. That phase is over. Now you're threatening them with possibility. The possibility that the story they told the world isn't airtight. The possibility that someone outside the inner circle understands the architecture. The possibility that others might start asking the wrong questions at the wrong time. And here's the cruel beauty of it. You don't have to push. Momentum is already doing the work. Once a secret starts to feel unsafe, people inside it start leaking without realizing it. Overcorrections, contradictions, defensive explanations no one asked for. You're watching it happen in real time, and you're not even touching the board. That's when they realize the most terrifying thing of all. You're not fighting them. You're letting them fight themselves. Okay, Mother, this is where you stay sharp, not aggressive, not smug, present, grounded, observant. You've crossed from ignored to uncomfortable. The next stage is unavoidable, and that transition doesn't require force. It requires composure. Let them underestimate your restraint. Let them mistake your calm for compliance. Because the truth is, you've already changed the temperature of the world they operate in. And once a system learns it can be watched, it never moves the same again. And here's the part they don't want to admit out loud. The part that keeps looping in their heads when the noise finally dies down. You didn't need them to collapse. You just needed them to notice you noticing. That's it. That single moment of mirrored awareness, that's when the balance tipped. Because power hates reflection. It prefers blind spots. And you turned yourself into a mirror they couldn't shatter without cutting themselves. They're replaying your tone now. Not your words, your tone. That measured calm, that almost affectionate certainty. The way you didn't sound angry or afraid or impressed. You sounded informed, as if what you were saying wasn't a revelation, but a confirmation, as if the truth had already settled in you long before it ever reached the surface. That's what unnerves them. Rage can be dismissed. Certainty can't. You've become the quiet proof that their control was always conditional. That it only worked as long as no one with emotional intelligence and pattern recognition stepped outside the script. And the moment you did, the script started glitching. People started hesitating mid-sentence. Protocols stopped aligning. Authority began second-guessing itself. Not because you attacked it, but because you stood outside of it without asking permission. You are the embodiment of a contradiction they were never trained to handle. You are warmth that doesn't submit, compassion that doesn't comply, intelligence that doesn't announce itself. You're not the rebel they prepared for. You're not the villain they can smear. You're the anomaly that makes everyone else look unstable by comparison. And deep down, they know this isn't a phase. This isn't a moment. This is who you are after the pain refined you. After betrayal stripped the naivety away. After silence taught you more than noise ever could. You didn't harden, you clarified. You didn't become cruel, you became precise. And precision is terrifying when it's paired with empathy, because it means you know exactly where it hurts, and exactly when not to touch it. They're starting to realize something else, too. You're not isolated. You never were. You're a signal, a frequency. People feel seen around you without knowing why. They start trusting their own perceptions again. They start questioning narratives they swallowed whole. That's the real danger. Not what you say, but what others start realizing in your presence. You don't recruit. You don't persuade. You activate. That's why the backlash is subtle. Why it comes dressed as concern, professionalism, just checking in. They don't want to fight. They want containment. They want you smaller, quieter, distracted, doubting yourself. They want you to second-guess that instinct that has never failed you. But here's the problem for them. You've already crossed the threshold where self-doubt lives. You know what you saw. You know what you felt. And you know the timing wasn't accidental. Once someone reaches that level of internal alignment, they stop being movable. Not stubborn, anchored. You're no longer reacting to pressure. You're observing it. You're no longer looking for cues. You are the cue. And everything that used to intimidate you now reads like choreography. So let them whisper, let them strategize, let them test the waters with half-truths and calculated silence. You're not in a hurry. You don't need closure. You don't need applause. You've already done the most irreversible thing possible. You've changed how they see you. And once you become someone a system can't predict, can't shame, can't rush, can't intimidate, you stop being a participant. You become a variable. And variables don't get erased. They get studied. Okay, Mother, hold this posture, this quiet, lethal grace, this balance of softness and steel, this awareness that you don't need to burn the world down to make it nervous. You just need to stand exactly where you are, seeing clearly, unafraid to be seen back. Because the secret isn't just exposed now, it's alert. And now that it's alert, everything changes. An alert secret doesn't sleep. It twitches, it overreacts, it starts making noise it was never meant to make. You can hear it if you're quiet enough. The subtle scrambling, the rushed decisions disguised as confidence, the sudden urgency where patience used to live. That's not strength. That's a system trying to outrun its own shadow. You're standing in the eye of that storm, and the wild part. You didn't create the chaos. You revealed the fragility. There's a difference. Chaos is loud. Fragility is exposed when pressure meets truth. And you applied pressure with elegance, with timing, with restraint. You let the weight of reality do the crushing. They're trying to reassert dominance now. You'll notice it in small, almost petty ways. A shift in tone, a forced smile, an unnecessary flex. Authority loves theater when it feels insecure. It needs the performance to convince itself the power is still there. But you see through it. You always have. Your nervous system learned early how to detect danger behind politeness, how to read threat wrapped in charm, how to feel lies before they're spoken. That's why you're dangerous without being destructive. You don't need to prove anything. You recognize it. And recognition dissolves illusions faster than confrontation ever could. They're also realizing you're not alone in the way they hoped you were. Not because you have an army, but because you have resonance. People don't rally around you like soldiers. They align with you like compasses finding north. They leave conversations with you thinking clearer, standing straighter, remembering things they forgot about themselves. That's not influence you can sanction or silence. That's an internal recalibration. You've become a reference point. And here's where the paradox tightens. The more they watch you, the more exposed they become. Surveillance goes both ways when the observed is aware. Every move they make to contain you reveals another seam, another crack, another tell. You're collecting information without lifting a finger. You're mapping reactions, not events. Reactions never lie. You learned long ago that the loudest threat isn't the one that attacks. It's the one that waits and watches. That's the lesson pain drilled into you. You survived by noticing patterns others dismissed. You stayed alive by staying observant. So when this moment arrived, when the secret finally blinked, you didn't flinch. You recognized the opening, and you didn't rush it. Because rushing is what people do when they're afraid to lose the moment. You weren't afraid. You trusted the process. You trusted yourself. You trusted that once awareness is introduced, it can't be undone. You can't unsee the architecture. You can't unknow the weakness. You can't go back to believing the lie once you've touched the truth. They're hoping this fades, that attention drifts, that time dulls the edge. They're betting on distraction, the oldest tactic in the book. But distraction doesn't work on someone who's already integrated their shadow. You don't need constant stimulation. You don't need applause. You don't need resolution. You're comfortable in the unresolved, because that's where leverage lives. This is the phase where patience becomes a weapon, not the passive kind, the kind that listens, the kind that waits for the second move, the kind that understands that pressure doesn't always come from pushing. Sometimes it comes from not relieving it. You let the question hang. You let the silence stretch. You let them fill the void with mistakes. And they will. Because when a secret knows it's compromised, it starts cannibalizing itself. Loyalty fractures, trust thins. Everyone starts protecting their own angle. Coordination suffers. That's not something you cause. That's something you allow. You're simply present while it happens. Okay, mother. Feel the control in that. Not dominance, not ego. Control born from self-mastery. From knowing you don't need to win loudly to win permanently. From understanding that the most irreversible shifts happen quietly under the surface while everyone else is arguing about optics. You didn't just make a global secret look dangerous. You reminded it what fear feels like. And once fear enters the bloodstream of power, it never quite recovers. And that's where this ends. Not with an explosion, not with applause, not with some dramatic collapse they can point to and explain away. It ends in something far worse for them. Permanent awareness. Because from this moment on, the secret knows it can be seen. Not by a mob, not by a headline, by you. And that kind of witness doesn't blink, doesn't forget, doesn't need to shout. It just exists, watching, remembering, adjusting. They'll try to move on like nothing happened. They'll act bored, dismissive, casual. They'll pretend this was a misunderstanding, a coincidence, a blip. But underneath that performance, the internal recalibration has already begun. Every future decision now carries an extra question they never had to ask before. Is she watching this? And that question alone will slow them down, make them hesitate, make them fracture. You didn't seize power. You infected certainty. That's the difference between conquerors and architects. Conquerors need constant motion to maintain control. Architects change one structural assumption and let gravity do the rest. You didn't knock on the door. You altered the foundation beneath it. And now the entire structure has to pretend it isn't leaning. Here's the final truth they'll never say out loud. You weren't supposed to make it this far with your awareness intact. The pain was supposed to dull you. The betrayal was supposed to confuse you. The silence was supposed to erase you. Instead, it refined you. It stripped away the unnecessary. It sharpened your perception until you could see the seams in things people swore were solid. You became calm where others became cruel. Focused where others became reactive. Grounded where others lost themselves. That's why you're terrifying in a way violence never could be. You don't need chaos to move things. You stabilize truth until lies start wobbling on their own. And now, you don't chase outcomes. You don't demand justice. You don't announce intentions. You simply continue living from that aligned, unshakable center where intuition and intellect move as one, where light and dark are no longer enemies, but tools, where you don't need permission to see clearly. Let them scramble, let them whisper, let them overcorrect. You're not here to destroy the world. You're here to remind it that nothing stays hidden forever once someone with courage, patience, and precision decides to look straight at it. Okay, Mother. Walk away knowing this. You didn't just expose them. You didn't just unsettle them. You didn't just make a global secret look dangerous. You made it aware. And awareness is the one thing power can never undo. Hold still for a second. Yeah, right there. Because this moment, this is the silence before they admit something they swore they never would. You feel it, don't you? That shift. That weight in the air when you walk in now. The way conversations slow down. The way eyes linger half a second longer than they're supposed to. That's not curiosity. That's respect. Raw, unfiltered, unwilling respect. And here's the part that messes with their heads the most. It didn't come from applause. It didn't come from approval. It came from survival. They don't like you. They don't agree with you. Hell, some of them still wake up hoping you fail. But none of them can deny you anymore. And that's eating them alive. Because respect hits different when it's forced. See, anyone can get love when they play clean, predictable, soft around the edges. But you walked straight through contradiction, saint and psychopath, in the same breath. Calm hands, dangerous mind, mercy in your eyes, violence in your discipline. You didn't choose a side. You became the paradox. They tried to label you once, tried to put you in a box they could manage. But every time they thought they understood you, you did something that shattered the file they built. Unpredictable, but not chaotic. Silent, but never absent. Controlled, but never harmless. That's when the tone changed. Because respect doesn't come from being loud. It comes from being undeniable. You didn't argue your worth. You didn't beg for a seat at the table. You let time, pressure, and precision do the talking. And now, even the ones who once plotted against you have to sit there, jaw tight, ego bruised, nodding in silence like, yeah, I see it. That's a dangerous kind of win. You know why this respect feels heavier than praise? Because it's built on fear they'll never admit out loud. Not fear of what you'll say. Fear of what you won't say. Fear of what you're capable of when you stop explaining yourself. They watched you take hits that would have broken them. Watched you lose things you never complained about. Watched you bleed without asking for witnesses. And instead of becoming bitter, you became sharper, quieter, colder in the right ways. That's when they realized, oh, this one doesn't need chaos to be dangerous. This one is the system. You didn't evolve in the light. You evolved where nobody was clapping, where pain was routine, where doubt tried to rot you from the inside out. And instead of collapsing, you adapted. Pain became data. Betrayal became strategy. Loneliness became focus. That's not normal growth. That's weaponized transformation. Now look at them, the same mouths that dismissed you, tight. The same eyes that overlooked you, calculating. They're measuring their words around you now, watching how they move, second-guessing their assumptions. Because deep down, they know something terrifying. You didn't win by accident. You won because you understood something they never will. That unpredictability isn't chaos when it's mastered. It's leverage. You can be warm and lethal, patient and ruthless, forgiving and unforgettable. You can let things slide or end them without raising your voice. And the fact they can't tell which version they'll get, that's what keeps them respectful. This is the kind of respect that doesn't come with smiles. It comes with distance, with careful language, with that subtle energy of, don't underestimate them again. You've crossed that line now, the one most people never reach, where enemies stop trying to beat you and start trying to understand you. That's when the power shifts, because admiration can fade, but forced respect, that sticks. They see it now. They feel it every time your name comes up and the room goes quiet. Every time someone says, yeah, I don't agree with them, but that but is everything. It means you've become real to them, too real to ignore, too proven to dismiss. You didn't become this by being pure. You became this by integrating your darkness instead of letting it own you. Angel who learned how demons think. Villain who chose restraint. That balance, that's rare. That's why it scares them. So stand there, say nothing. Let them wrestle with the truth they avoided for years. The respect is real now, not because they like you, not because they approve, but because deep down, they know, whatever you are, you're not someone they can afford to doubt ever again. And here's the part they don't talk about, the part that keeps them awake when the noise dies down. Respect didn't arrive for you like a celebration. It arrived like a verdict, quiet, heavy, final. They didn't clap, they recalibrated, because once people like them realize you're real, they don't cheer. You change their math. They start asking different questions. Not who does he think he is, but what does he see that we missed? Not can we stop him, but what happens if we provoke the wrong version? That's when the room temperature drops. You've noticed it. That subtle stiffness when you speak. That careful politeness from people who used to be casual. They're not being respectful because they're kind. They're being respectful because they're aware. Aware that you don't move emotionally anymore. You move precisely. Aware that you don't react. You respond when it matters. Aware that you don't need validation because you already passed the test that broke them. And that awareness, it terrifies insecure minds. See, most people only understand power when it's loud, shouting, posturing, overcompensating. But your power, it's controlled, compressed, stored, like a weapon with the safety on, not because it's harmless, but because you decide when things escalate. They saw you walk through fire without announcing it, saw you lose things you loved without turning bitter, saw you get underestimated and never rush to correct it. And at some point, something clicked in their heads. Oh, this one doesn't need approval to advance. That's when denial dies, because here's the truth they hate admitting. You didn't become dangerous by becoming cruel. You became dangerous by becoming clear. Clear about who you are, clear about what you tolerate, clear about what you're willing to walk away from, even if it costs you everything. That clarity, that's dominance disguised as calm. You don't threaten. You don't explain yourself anymore. You don't chase the narrative. You let results do the damage. And now even the ones who once stood against you feel it in their bones. That arguing with you won't work. That undermining you won't land. That trying to bait you only exposes them. So they choose something else. Distance. Respectful distance. Because they can't read you like they read others. They can't predict your next move, because you don't move from ego. You move from intent. You don't lash out when disrespected. You file it away. You observe. You wait. That's the kind of patience that rewires power dynamics. You didn't just evolve. You outgrew the game while still mastering it. That's why your presence feels different now. It's not aggressive. It's decisive. When you speak, people listen. Not because you demand it, but because they sense there's weight behind every word. When you stay silent, it's louder than most people yelling. And when you leave a room, something always feels unfinished. Like they missed a chance they won't get back. That's respect forged under pressure. And the ones who opposed you, they're stuck with a brutal realization. You didn't beat them by becoming louder than them. You beat them by becoming unavoidable. They can't discredit you without exposing themselves. They can't challenge you without risking humiliation. They can't ignore you because your absence still affects outcomes. So they do the only thing left. They acknowledge you carefully. And you know what makes this even darker? You're not done. They respect who you are now, but they fear who you're still becoming. Because they can see it, the restraint, the discipline, the unfinished edge. They know you haven't even used everything you learned in the dark. You integrated it, you refined it, you locked it behind self-control. Angel who learned how to survive hell. Demon who learned restraint. That balance isn't taught. It's earned through suffering most people would never endure. So let them watch. Let them whisper. Let them adjust their behavior around you like gravity shifted. You don't need to remind them. They already know. The respect is real now, not because you demanded it, but because they finally understand one simple, irreversible truth. Whatever path you're on, standing in your way is no longer an option. And that's the part they can't escape. The irreversibility of it. Respect, once forced into existence, doesn't go back into hiding. They can pretend, they can posture, they can act casual. But the nervous system doesn't lie. Their bodies react to you before their mouths do. You see it in the micro-hesitation before they speak, the way jokes soften around you, the way criticism turns diplomatic, the way your name changes tone, depending on who's listening. That's not politics, that's instinct. Because at some point they realize something that can't be unseen. You don't need momentum anymore. You are momentum. You don't chase outcomes. You bend probabilities. You don't force doors. You wait until they swing open on their own. And when they do, it looks effortless to the outside, which only deepens the fear. They tell themselves stories to cope. Lucky, timing, right place, right moment. But the ones who really watched you know better. They saw the nights where nothing made sense. The seasons where you were invisible. The stretch of time where every signal said, stop. And you kept refining. They saw you lose, adjust, recalibrate, without collapsing, without begging, without changing your core. That's not luck. That's discipline, forged in isolation. And isolation does something to a mind like yours. It sharpens it. It strips away noise. It kills dependency. It teaches you how to sit with discomfort until discomfort becomes irrelevant. Most people avoid that phase at all costs. You lived there. That's why now, when pressure shows up, you don't flinch. You don't rush. You don't need to dominate the room. You let the room come to you. And when it does, the hierarchy silently rearranges itself. People like to believe respect is a social contract. It's not. It's a biological response to competence mixed with restraint. You have both. They sense that you could escalate, but choose not to. That you could expose, but stay quiet. That you could dismantle, but prefer precision. That choice is what unsettles them. Because uncontrolled aggression is easy to predict. Controlled power. That's a nightmare for anyone trying to outmaneuver you. You're not reactive anymore. You're selective. You don't correct disrespect immediately. You let patterns reveal themselves. You let people show you exactly who they are when they think you're not paying attention. And then, when you act, it's clean, decisive, final, no drama, no explanation, just consequences. That's why even the ones who dislike you speak about you carefully now. They don't want to trigger something they don't understand. They don't want to miscalculate your silence. Because silence in your hands stopped being weakness a long time ago. It became camouflage. You learned when to disappear, when to observe, when to let others overplay their hand while you stayed unreadable. That's not kindness. That's mastery, and mastery doesn't need applause. It commands respect by existing. They know you're not chasing dominance, which is exactly why you have it. You don't need to win every exchange. You let people win battles that don't matter, so they don't see the war they're already losing. That's the saint-psychopath paradox they can't resolve. You have empathy, but it doesn't weaken you. You have darkness, but it doesn't control you. You have restraint, but it doesn't make you passive. You integrated all of it, and that integration, that's what separates you from pretenders. Now understand this, because this is important. Respect isn't the end state, it's a checkpoint. They respect you now because they've accepted you're not leaving. But what really unsettles them is what comes next. Growth didn't slow you down. It accelerated you. Pain didn't distort you. It clarified you. Opposition didn't stop you. It refined your strategy. So when they look at you, they're not just seeing who you are. They're calculating who you're becoming. And that future version, that's the one they're adjusting for. That's why doors open quicker now. Why resistance feels thinner. Why obstacles seem less committed. The environment adapts when a force proves consistent. You didn't demand respect. You made disrespect impractical. So let them sit with it. Let them reconcile their old opinions with present reality. Let them feel that quiet pressure every time they cross paths with you. You don't need to remind them. They already know. The respect is real now. And the most dangerous part, you earned it without ever needing their permission. And here's the truth hiding underneath all of it. The layer they feel but can't articulate. Respect didn't just change how they treat you. It changed how they see themselves around you. That's why it's uncomfortable. Because your presence forces comparison, and comparison exposes weakness. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, internally. They measure their discipline against yours, their patience against yours, their courage against the way you kept moving when nothing guaranteed it would work out. And most of the time, they come up short. That's not your fault. That's just reality catching up. You didn't become intimidating by flexing power. You became intimidating by not needing to. They see how little you react to chaos now, how drama slides off you like it's beneath your notice, how you don't rush to defend your name, your choices, your trajectory, because you already tested yourself in ways their opinions can't touch. You've been alone with your thoughts when no one was watching. You've confronted doubt without outsourcing reassurance. You've faced the version of yourself that could have quit and didn't. That kind of internal victory changes how you carry yourself. It alters your posture, your timing, your tone. It turns you into someone who doesn't move to prove, only to execute. And that's when respect stops being optional. They can sense that you don't need them aligned with you to keep winning. You're not fueled by validation. You're powered by alignment with your own code. That's rare. And rarity commands distance and deference. Look at how people talk around you now. Less careless, more deliberate. They choose words like tools instead of toys, because they know you hear everything. Even when you say nothing, they know you don't miss patterns. You don't miss inconsistencies. You don't miss shifts in loyalty or tone. And the scariest part for them? You don't call it out immediately. You let it play. You let people reveal themselves fully before you decide what access they deserve. That patience isn't kindness. It's strategy. You've learned something most never do. Immediate reaction gives away leverage. Delayed response multiplies it. That's why your silence carries weight now. That's why people fill it with assumptions, worries, self-corrections. Your quiet forces them to confront themselves. And even your opposition knows it. They don't hate you the way they used to. Hate requires certainty. What they feel now is hesitation. They're unsure which version of you they're dealing with. The composed one, the forgiving one, the decisive one, or the version that simply removes people from relevance without warning. That ambiguity keeps them respectful, because you've proven something undeniable. You don't need to win loudly to win permanently. You let others underestimate you once, maybe even twice, but never long enough to make it a habit. Now the lesson is learned. They watched you absorb pressure that cracked others, watched you stay composed when chaos begged for reaction, watched you walk away from ego traps without needing the last word, and slowly, without ceremony, the hierarchy adjusted. Not because you demanded it, but because reality enforced it. You don't posture, you don't threaten, you don't over-explain. You simply exist at a frequency they can't fake. That's why respect clings to you now, even from people who don't want to give it. And understand this clearly. This is the most dangerous phase, because respect isn't fear, but it's the doorway to it. Not fear of violence, fear of irrelevance, fear of being outpaced, fear of misjudging you again. They know you're no longer predictable by past versions of yourself. You adapt faster than they update their assumptions. That makes you untouchable in a way they can't attack directly. So they adjust. They soften their edges. They watch before they speak. They choose diplomacy over dismissal. Because deep down, they've accepted something they once resisted. You're not a phase. You're not a fluke. You're not a moment. You're a force that learned restraint, and forces with restraint reshape environments without announcing it. So let the respect sit heavy in the room. Let it stay unspoken. Let it make people uncomfortable. You didn't come this far to be liked. You came this far to be undeniable. And now, even the ones who stand against you know the truth they'll never say out loud. You're not someone they can afford to underestimate ever again. And that's where it settles, not in applause, not in praise, but in that quiet adjustment everyone makes when they finally accept reality. You don't have to announce yourself anymore. Your presence already did the talking. Your history already testified. Your restraint already proved the depth of your control. They know now. You're not dangerous because you're loud. You're dangerous because you're finished explaining, finished reacting, finished chasing acknowledgement, finished proving what pain already forged into you. Respect didn't arrive because you softened. It arrived because you survived without breaking, evolved without losing your core, and learned when to stay silent instead of spilling your power everywhere. Even the ones against you feel it. They might resist it emotionally, but they obey it behaviorally. They adjust, they pause, they choose their words. That's how you know it's real. So don't perform, don't celebrate, just move forward the way you always have. Deliberate, unreadable, grounded. Let them watch, let them calculate, let them wonder. You already crossed the line they're still trying to understand. The respect is real now. And the most powerful part? You earned it by becoming someone who never needs to ask for it again.